We are in crunch time of fantasy football. Players are flying off the waiver wire. Bye weeks are killing rosters. So it is extremely easy to fall behind everybody else in your league. But lucky for you, in this video, I'm going to be giving you guys a list of league winning players that can break out later in the season that you should stash on your bench before that happens. You guys know I hate wasting time in these videos, so make sure you're subscribed before you do watch the rest of this video. But the first guy we need to be stashing on our bench is some guy that I don't understand how he's still available. It is only a matter of time until Michael Wilson becomes a league winner, or at least a guy that we can be starting consistently now that Kyler Murray is back. That is the main reason. He is an upgrade from Josh Jacobs and Clayton Tune, whether you think so or not. Is Kyler coming back to throw 40 passes a game and have some crazy kind of CJ Stroud level passing numbers? No, that's not what he does. That's not what they need him to do, and that's not what he needs to do to make wide receivers fantasy relevant. He's had 5, 6, and 6 targets in his last 3 games, by far the best stretch of his season. That's only going to continue with Kyler, but it's not like those 3 games were cakewalk matchups. They were all against more negative fantasy defenses that don't allow the most points to wide receivers. But again, if we look at his chart, he's been increasing his snaps every single week. He's trusted, he's seeing time on field, and he saw his season high in snaps at almost 90% in week 10. And one of the main reasons I really do like this guy is because he's the tallest wide receiver on the Cardinals by far. He is 6'2". The rest of their wide receivers, Hollywood Brown, Greg Dortch, Rondale Moore, they're all 5'8", 5'7", and 5'6". They're not tall. We've seen guys like Mike Williams and Donald Parham for the Chargers be really efficient in the red zone and extend this team's creativity in routes because they're so tall and they can be utilized that way, and that is exactly what he's going to do as the tallest wide receiver on this team. I would not be surprised if they run specific plays for him in the red zone, 3rd and short, other situations like that. Right now with his time on field, he is the wide receiver 2, but with the way Hollywood Brown has been playing, I wouldn't be surprised if we see wide receiver 1 weeks from him here and there. And this team also has one of the easiest playoff schedules for fantasy wide receivers, if not the easiest. It is a cakewalk. But again, if you guys are enjoying this video, make sure to like it up so I know I'm doing good and this is the right kind of content you guys want to see. But moving into the next stash we need to be housing in our roster on our bench is A.T. Perry, and this is a guy that I really do like. Let me explain why he needs to be on your roster. This is a rookie wide receiver for the Saints that has been increasing his snaps a bit over the past few weeks before their bye in week 10. He absolutely dominated if you look at his chart here, and that was all because Michael Thomas got injured and left early in that game. And in that game, he saw a team high 84% of the routes. He came and played every single wide receiver snap in place of Michael Thomas. And of course, that led him to 4 targets and a touchdown. But Michael Thomas suffered a knee injury in that game that we didn't know quite too much about. He was going into the bye week. There wasn't really any news, but now it's confirmed he's landing on IR. He's not going to be playing for the next 4 weeks, and knowing Michael Thomas, probably not for the rest of the season if we're being honest, at least the fantasy season. But again, A.T. Perry led the team in snaps in week 10 when Michael Thomas was out, and he was the wide receiver 2 behind Olave, not Rashid Shaheed. If you guys have been around this page for long enough, you know why. Rashid Shaheed is more of a field stretching kind of dynamic guy. He's really valuable in real football, but it doesn't really translate to fantasy. But like Michael Wilson, A.T. Perry is a 6'5" wide receiver. He can be used in the red zone. I'm sure he's going to get a decent amount of plays drawn up for him specifically. A lot of opportunity, a lot of upside, and he's in a great offense to succeed. Is it led by Patrick Mahomes? No, but it's led by Derek Carr, a guy that's going to pass 40 times a game. This team ranks 4th in passing attempts amongst the entire NFL. He's going to get his opportunities, especially if he's on the field all the time. You guys can put 2 and 2 together. More time on field equals more passing attempts, equals more opportunities for wide receivers, equals more fantasy points, equals more opportunities for touchdowns, all that good stuff. You already know this. Not to mention he has some great matchups against the Falcons and Lions where they're going to have to pass to stay in the game. You should also be looking to stash Isaiah Likely if you need a tight end or not. Maybe your trade deadline hasn't happened yet. You can use him as trade bait. Either way, keep him on your team. You could use him any week here and there. He is the fill-in tight end behind Mark Andrews. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. There are speculations he could return for playoffs, but that doesn't mean anything for fantasy football because it ends in week 17 or 18 depending on your league. But you can't even call him a fill-in tight end because when Mark Andrews left that game last week, he played every single tight end snap. He was the only tight end to see the field outside of Mark Andrews. And moving forward, this is going to continue. And let's go through it again. I know you guys have the smartest, biggest brains on YouTube. More time on field equals more opportunities, equals more passing attempts, equals more everything. Isaiah Likely is a guy we need to be adding with priority off the waivers, stash him on your team. And it's not even like he's a mid-tier tight end that doesn't have any choice but to fill in to be somewhat decent. Yes, he's not going to get Mark Andrews level targets and usage and numbers, but in the 3 games last year that he filled in for Mark Andrews, he averaged 8 targets a game. He had 200 yards total and 2 touchdowns. That's pretty decent for a tight end. People forget that he's actually a viable fill-in. He's a guy that you should be adding. But another guy we need to be stashing on our bench is Zay Jones. You might have heard me talk about this before, so I'm going to make it quick. Somehow he's not rostered in more than 40% of leagues. I understand he was injured for a majority of the season. He was dealing with legal trouble last week. He's out. He's fine. He's good. He's playing. So he came out in his first game back from all those things, having 4 targets, 20 yards. Not the best game. To be fair, he wasn't on a full snap count. He only played 60% of the snaps, but the good news is he ran 27 routes on those 60 snaps. Obviously, that is behind Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk, but not by much. Those two had 30 and 31 routes run on the day. And that's great news coming off an injury like he did. The second he comes back, he's still an integral part of this offense. They want to use him. A lot of people forget about his breakout at the end of last season. And we got to remember in the beginning of this season, he was the guy to be used in 2 wide receiver sets over Christian Kirk. Is that going to happen now? No. Christian Kirk has proven himself to have a part in this offense, but he's still going to be used. The Jaguars are one of the most 3 wide receiver set heavy in the NFL, which means there's going to be all of these wide receivers on the field at once, so it's not really going to cap his upside. His offense is putting it together, and statistically, they have been way better when Zay Jones is playing. Is it a big coincidence? I don't know. All I know is that when he's on the field, he's getting targets, and the team is looking better. Another wide receiver I love stashing. Again, I don't understand how he's not rostered in more than 50% of leagues or anything. Stash him on your bench. Jameson Williams is a guy we need to go through and get, and I'm going to love explaining this to you guys. After hovering around about a 40% snap share for the beginning of the season after he came back from suspension, after their bye week, he absolutely increased his snaps by a lot. Last week, he saw his season high in 65% of the snaps, and that is only going up. And a lot of times, we do forget that Jameson Williams was a first-round pick. He has the talent profile to be viable. This is one of the best young route runners in the NFL, and I'm going to show you this clip to explain it more to you. Jameson Williams is going to run this route here on one of the better corners in the NFL, but then he's going to stop on a literal blade of grass, turn around and catch this ball, or at least wait for it. People praise wide receivers for their speed and agility, which he is in the 98th percentile of. He's one of the best, but nobody ever talks about the ability to decelerate and turn around, stop on a dime for the ball, and that is a skill that is insanely hard to master. But that just shows that he has the talent to be a good wide receiver. Now he's coming off his injury and suspension. He's seeing more snaps. Things are finally starting to click. He's still working up to his full level of snap count. In real life football, he is a very crucial part of this offense. He had the Josh Reynolds role before he was suspended, obviously. He needs to be on the field to elevate the offense, take the top off of defenses so guys like Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta can elevate their own play in the middle of the field. So because of that, he's going to be on the field a lot, which is going to give him a lot of opportunity. But if I'm going to take a dart throw on one of these wide receivers to stash, I'm going to take a guy that has one of the top talent profiles on one of the best offenses in the NFL. Another stash we need to keep an eye on that I don't quite understand how he's still only rostered in 17% of leagues is Jalen Guyton. This Chargers team continues to battle with injury. Mike Williams went out for the season. Josh Palmer is on IR. Quentin Johnston can't catch a ball. Somebody's going to need to step up in this offense to be the wide receiver 2 behind Keenan Allen, and there's no doubt that it could be him. This is a guy that's familiar with this offense. He's been with the Chargers since 2019. He's filled in. He's played full seasons. He's been a guy that Justin Herbert is used to. But he's been a crucial part to this team. In his second game back from a season-ending injury, he saw an 80% snap share in week 10. This is not normal for guys coming off injuries like this, but he did it anyways, and he made it work with 6 targets. I hate to mention it, but I gotta let you know, that one game that he came back in, he had more points in fantasy than Quentin Johnston has all season. Quentin Johnston has had a cakewalk to be a viable wide receiver for this season. Again, Mike Williams was out. Josh Palmer was out. All of the guys that he had to beat out in the beginning of the season are injured, and he still can't produce. He can't be relied upon. That wide receiver 2 spot is still 100% up for grabs. Josh Palmer will come off IR in a couple weeks, so Jalen Guyton might take a hit from that, but he still can be viable in the long term as well as the short term, which he will be. And he's in an offense to succeed. Justin Herbert is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. They're a top 10 passing offense. It's all good green signs for me. But you guys love when I talk about these running backs. Another guy we need to stash is Chandler, a guy that we were talking about before, and then Alexander Mattison was dealing with a head injury. He was concussed, possibly missing last week. He didn't end up missing. He ended up playing, and all of us dropped Chandler. Nobody wants him anymore. But somebody said once that one man's trash is another man's treasure, and this is exactly what we're dealing with here in this situation. The Vikings don't and never did want to make Alexander Mattison a workhorse running back. They signed Cam Akers, got him involved to where it was a 50-50 backfield until he got injured. He's out for the season, and now they're elevating Chandler. It's not like he's just a pity back that they're using because they don't want to make him a workhorse. In his 2 full games that he played with Madison, he saw 15 and 10 carries, and he was only seeing a 40% snap share. This is a low snap share, but a high usage rate. He's a talented running back. Again, he ranks in the 98th percentile of speed for running backs. He's a great change of pace guy. There is a little bit of hope for the receiving game. In their last game against Denver, he saw 4 targets out of the backfield. If he could continue to see even 1 or 2 targets out of the backfield, that could raise his floor just that much more, and we could get him on our team pretty safely. And not to mention, there's always a chance that Alexander Mattison could get injured, which would make him the workhorse RB1 because there's really nobody else left to elevate. And we're getting down to the back end of the season, so now might not be a bad time to stash these handcuff running backs. But if you're looking for a tight end to stash, whether you need one or not, please go through and take a look at Tyler Conklin. This is a tight end that's averaging 60 to 70% of the snaps for the entirety of the season and 5 targets a game, but really what interests me is the situation in this offense. Zach Wilson has been benched at least for the foreseeable future for Tim Boyle, and if we know anything about inexperienced quarterbacks or at least new quarterbacks to offenses that they're not completely used to running with the starters with, they love to target their tight ends. Some people say, some old retired quarterbacks say that tight ends are the quarterback's best friend, and I expect that to continue. Just look at what DTR did last week. David Njoku had a season high with 15 targets on the day, and you can also make a pretty safe assumption that there is no way Tim Boyle is worse than Zach Wilson. Despite being 23rd in pass attempts, they are 31st in passing yards. They are last in red zone efficiency, last in red zone touchdowns, last in passing touchdowns. Their entire offense is ranked 31st in the NFL. There's no way it can be any worse than this. A change in quarterback could be all this offense needs. Not that they're going to be the best offense in the NFL, but for Tyler Conklin's sake, he could be all he needs to be a little bit elevated to make him a viable guy to start in the future. And their strength of schedule for tight ends is completely a cakewalk for the rest of the season. They get the Dolphins, the Falcons, the Texans, all top 5 to points allowed at the tight end position, and his fantasy playoff schedule is pretty favorable as well. But now is the time in fantasy football coming up this week and next week where you need to be stashing the handcuff to your running back. If you have a guy like Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, you need to be getting these guys. If you don't know what a handcuff running back is, it's essentially just the backup to a top tier workhorse running back, to where if they were to get injured, their backup would be a really viable startable guy every week. And the reason why we stash these handcuffs is because of the injury risk. If you get to the playoffs and your top number 1 running back gets injured, you're essentially screwed. If you have these running backs, you have an automatic startable running back. If you don't have a guaranteed spot for the playoffs already, you probably don't need to roster these guys, but if you do, go ahead and do it, especially if you have a number 1 running back already. This includes guys like Ezekiel Elliott. Yes, Ramondre Stevenson might not be the best running back in the league, but Zeke splits this backfield around 30 to 40 of the snaps compared to Ramondre's 60. He gets involved in the receiving game. He still gets decent carries, but if Ramondre were to get injured, he would be the only running back in this backfield. He'd be a workhorse, and he doesn't really need this Patriots offense to be the best to be viable. Kenneth Gainwell is another handcuff you should get to DeAndre Swift. Again, if he were to go out with injury, he would get receiving work, running work. This is one of the best offenses in the NFL. It's a great idea to stash him. Tyler Algier is another guy you can get to fill in for Bijan Robinson. He has the resume. He had a 1,000-yard rushing season last year. He's already getting some work with Bijan now. You can stash Josh Kelly as well. Again, injuries equals workhorse. And really any other guy you can think of like Tank Bigsby to fill in for Travis Etienne. But that is going to finish off this video of the must stash players we need to have on our roster moving into the fantasy playoffs, or even just the next couple weeks. I appreciate you guys watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video coming tomorrow. So make sure to be subscribed and come around for that.